Hey, it's Huck. And, well, you can tell the political season is well underway. I don't know how many Republicans are eventually going to throw in the hat, but at this rate, it seems like one or two are doing so every single day. Now, some estimate that the actual field in the Republican Party, when all is said and done, it's going to be somewhere maybe in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 candidates. At this point, the Republican field looks like it's going to be very, very crowded. And on the Democratic side, as of right now, there's really only two declared candidates, and you'd be hard-pressed to find more than maybe three others who at least have hinted a strong likelihood that they want to get involved. So we'll have to see where that goes. But what I wanted to talk about just briefly today, because I got to keep this short, is I figure this is probably as good a time as any to start debunking some of the Republican mythology that we are going to be bombarded with once this campaign really gets underway in a real sense. And so I think I'm going to limit that to two subjects here today. And one is that an awful lot of the candidates in the Republican field are either pushing for or at least amenable to this whole idea of a constitutional amendment for a federally balanced budget, limiting Congress's ability to raise the deficit. And I'm not even going to discuss much about how awful an idea that actually is. Suffice it to say that Reagan, who is idolized among these same Republican zealots calling for this, Reagan's own budget director thought that this was a terrible idea, and for good reason. One of the things you hear candidates who propose this frequently will say is, hey, all we're asking is that the federal government live within their budget just like American families have to do. Well, the truth is, that sounds really wise and it seems sensible on the surface until you examine exactly what they're really saying there. Because the truth is, nothing could be further from the truth. American families don't live within their budget. We never have. But particularly, post-World War II, we haven't. And all you need to do to examine that is, how many folks do you know that could buy a car or buy a home without going into some debt? You get a mortgage on your house. I don't know anybody, personally, that could go out and buy, even the cheapest home in their neighborhood or in their city. Who has cash for that? Who has a savings account where you can take out, whatever it is, $80,000, $150,000, $224,000, whatever it is that, your home is going to end up costing you. You go in debt for that, of course you do. You mortgage your future, and hopefully within what you think, your means to pay are. Same thing with buying a car, So the idea of borrowing money, of going into some debt in order to survive, is very much a part of the American family, probably more so in the last few decades than it ever has been. And while there was a reduction in consumer debt as far as credit cards are concerned, and even some mortgages, immediately after the crash of 2008, largely that was because so many folks had to file bankruptcy and their homes were foreclosed on, and they ended up discharging that debt in one way or the other. And another reason is because after the crash, a lot of folks decided, who could manage to, paid off their credit cards and decided, not to have these huge credit card debts hanging over their head. And so credit card debt has largely been reduced. There's a slight uptick in it lately, though. You know, we have recovered enough from the crash where that's starting to rise. But probably the biggest increase in debt right now is probably student loan debt, which is way up. So anytime you hear a Republican say that the federal government should live within its means and not borrow and not go into debt, and that this is a reason to have a balanced budget every year, keep in mind that American families wouldn't have a home, most likely wouldn't have a car if they had to live under those restraints themselves. So it's just a flat-out lie. The other thing I think that we really have to keep in mind, I mean, nobody wants to see our debt get out of control like it has, but the two main reasons why our debt grew astronomically after the crash was because, one, first Reagan and then Bush Jr. slashed taxes, particularly on the rich. And I remember thinking back in the 1980s when this was first proposed and eventually implemented under Reagan, that there was an ulterior motive to slashing these taxes by such a drastic amount as Reagan did in his first term. And the reason really wasn't just so that the wealthy could retain so much more of their wealth. I mean, that was going to get him in good stead with the wealthy, make a lot of really rich people really happy. But the other reason behind it, and I saw through this right from the beginning, and people still, I don't think, recognize this, is that the whole plan was, if we can limit the resources of the federal government, if we can limit the revenue that they take in, eventually it is going to put all of our safety net programs, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, all of our welfare programs, Section 8 housing, all of it, we would have to rethink of whether or not we could afford these programs. Because all of them, including Social Security, would all be underfunded. And clearly that has happened. So that brings me to the other thing that I wanted to touch upon today, and this is important. I think while there is general consensus among mainstream Republicans today for this push for a constitutional amendment to balance the federal budget each year, and that's complete nonsense. I mean, such an amendment, for instance, would require a 2/3 majority in Congress and the Senate to override such legislation in times of great need, like the next recession that we face. Part of the budget deficit was, one, all the taxes that were slashed and the revenue that wasn't coming in, but the other part was because of the housing bubble, because of poor regulation on Wall Street, because everything crashed, President Obama was faced with an impossible situation requiring a huge bailout of Wall Street, including a number of things like the stimulus package and other things, cash for clunkers, all things that contributed to also giving us some short-term debt that we hadn't counted on, all to get us to recover a little bit faster from that crash. You know, heaven forbid we have a balanced budget amendment and anything similar to that happening again. I can't see any probability that we could get a 2/3 majority in Congress to override that amendment, you know, in time to recover from the next crisis. So there are reasons why there has to be some flexibility of the federal government to be able to implement, you know, some type of budgetary distress debt. There is a lot of talk among Republicans, and I would say they almost almost universally agree to this. There are a couple of exceptions. Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, as crazy as they are on social policy, they recognize the strength and need for Social Security. Democrats are kind of split on this. The Democratic answer to strengthening Social Security has always been to compromise, largely. If we have to raise the retirement age a year or two, that may fix the problem, at least temporarily. Truth is, that's a terrible idea. And what Republicans are talking about, whether it's Scott Walker or Jeb Bush or any of the mainstream Republicans, not just the crazies, is similar tactics. Raising the age for retirement, or slashing the amount of benefits. It's already near impossible for some folks to go on Social Security disability. And trust me, I know a little bit about this. They delay folks getting their disability income even when they're well qualified, to the point where they out and out reject them. And so there are people around this country that are waiting in excess of 2 or 3 years to get disability, Social Security disability income that they qualify for. And there seems to be a myth out there that a lot of people are collecting Social Security disability and they really don't deserve it. They really aren't qualified for it. I don't know. If that's true anywhere, I haven't seen it. I mean, I personally haven't seen it. I know some folks who are ridiculously disabled, who had to fight tooth and nail to get it, for a year or 2 years, and even then, they had to wait to get that money, and they went, all that period of time with no income at all, living off the kindness of their family, basically, in the meantime. For some folks like me, that's not even an option. So, at any rate, but these are the tactics that Republicans are talking about. There are even among some in the Republican Party that would like to do away with Social Security altogether, and that shouldn't be too surprising. Republicans were never in favor of the program to begin with. What you will hear a lot of candidates talk about, and I think the scary thing is that there are a lot of Republicans, governors, Scott Walker, Brownback in Kansas are another good example. There are a lot of Republican governors right now that are slashing welfare benefits. State after Republican state are making the criteria to qualify for food stamps or Medicaid much, much tougher. We already know, how many, I don't know what it is, 17 Republican states have, refused that Medicaid expansion. That is free federal dollars to them to put more folks on Medicaid. But Republicans have resisted this in the vast majority of Republican-controlled states. In the case of Texas, you're talking about more than 1.5 million people that would be eligible, for some form of medical assistance that aren't getting it. These are largely women and children. Same thing in Florida. I think there's something like 700 or 800,000 people that are being denied benefits in the state of Florida simply because they were refusing this Medicaid expansion. I hope I'm right on those numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but it's lots of people. Similarly, you're having all of these Republican candidates, some of them who are governors and have done this in their states already, like Governor Walker, who are calling for ways of reducing the costs that we're spending on Social Security and these as they refer to them, entitlements. Now, there's nothing entitling to these benefits, but 75% of the folks in most of these states who are getting these benefits are women and children. But probably the most insidious thing that Republicans are saying about this right now is, the Social Security program is going to run out of money in something like 2033, and we have got to do something to solve this problem. And so among the recommendations that they're making are that we raise the retirement age from, right now it's being phased to age 67. They're suggesting that we should raise it to age 70. Well, this is fine, I suppose, if you're rich and you're a politician and you're making more money than you need. I mean, with a job like that, that's why these guys never retire. I mean, how many people are in the Senate right now that are already age 70 and they're still going, That's because they love their jobs. It's not a hard job. They can do it no matter how. But the average person, the average Joe, probably can't wait to retire. And that's just a fact. For many Americans, their jobs are hard. They can't wait to retire because they are aging. It is physically more and more difficult each year to do their job. And that's simply the truth for the vast majority of Americans. It's also true that while it's great to say people are living longer today, that's very much dependent on how much money you make a year. The wealthy live, the top 10% in this country live an average of something like 6 years longer than those in the bottom half of this country. People that are making $15,000 to $25,000 a year, which is a good 40% of Americans. The less money you make, the shorter your lifespan. The truth is that while it's true overall, Americans do live longer, the actual the folks that are receiving some assistance from the government have an average lifespan of only 1.6 years longer than when Social Security was passed back in the 1940s, under President Roosevelt. It's not fair to say, well, everybody's living longer. Everybody's not living longer. The poorest folks, the people that probably are breaking their back on their jobs and probably need to retire the soonest, are the ones that are living the shortest right now, and probably most deserving of finally being able to, take advantage of retirement and be rewarded for, so many years, 30, 40, some cases 45 years of hard work in their lives. Walker's comment the other day that was highlighted, I think, in an article I read from Ezra Klein's publication Vox. Walker apparently made some comment that poverty rates have not declined despite all of these trillions of dollars since the 1960s that we've been throwing at the problem. And one, he's just out and out wrong. I mean, the fact is that if you take those programs into consideration, poverty rates actually have declined something like close to 50% since the 1960s. The same can be true, by the way, and something that he didn't mention here, but Social Security, another entitlement program that, like I say, Republicans are eager to try to undermine. The fact is that before Social Security was implemented in the 1930s, under President Roosevelt, virtually half of all senior citizens were either living in poverty or going bankrupt, losing their homes. Senior citizens today, thanks to Social Security, are among the most stable components overall of all Americans. Something less than 10% of seniors overall live in poverty today. A far cry from, what it was in the 30s. So, again, Democrats seem to be divided on this. And again, Democrats tend to, while they all want to preserve Social Security and these safety nets, there does seem to be a split in the Democratic Party among the more progressive Democrats, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Bernie Sanders in the party, who feel that we should strengthen Social Security, that we should pour even more money into it. If we have raised the poverty rate, 46.5%, lowered the poverty rate by 46, if we have lowered the poverty rate by nearly 50% through the efforts that we've made thus far, then by increasing the amount of assistance that we give to these folks, or expanding to more folks, is going to decrease those numbers, decrease that number into something much lower still. And of course, the question has always been, where do you come up with the money? And my solution is certainly not the same as what you will hear most Republicans quote. I mean, Republicans are hell-bent on cutting, slashing, if not outright eliminating these programs. And every solution that they make would only make things worse for a majority of folks who need this kind of help. Raising, the requirements, slashing the amount of money that you qualify for to go on Medicaid, for instance. I mean, there are a number of Republican states right now who, I think in Texas, if you make $4,000 a year, you're not eligible for Medicaid. It's ridiculous. I believe that one of the things we really start needing to look at, and Republicans hate to hear this because, again, this is taxing the rich. But the truth is, when you live in a era when the rich are hoarding, like 99% of the income overall, that's where all the money is. So, for instance, there are hedge fund managers on Wall Street that are raking in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And because of the way they earn their money, it is considered investment income, and they're paying virtually no tax on this income. Until Obamacare came along, the only thing they ever paid on this was a capital gains tax, and there were ways around that. Some rich people are so greedy, and I don't mean to categorize all rich people as greedy, because that's certainly not true. But some, that even though they pay a lower percentage tax on their investment income, like hedge fund managers, where, for instance, it's practically totally exempt from Social Security taxes and other things, or at least it's only earned income that is taxed as Social Security tax. And then it's only taxed at, I think, the first $106,000, or maybe it's $110,000. Anything over that is not taxed for Social Security. And, the explanation for that always was, well, once they start collecting Social Security is capped at a certain amount that you can only get so much. The truth is, that's where all the income is. We could forget about raising the age for Social Security. That's only going to raise so much money, and the truth is, if you raised the Social Security tax, the income levels that could be taxed for Social Security purposes, if you opened up investment income, let's say investment income of over $1 million, we're going to tax Social Security. We're going to tax investment income. Any income of over $1 million is going to be taxed for Social Security. The amount of money that we would bring into Social Security by just raising the threshold on earned income, above the current threshold of, like I say, around $106,000 to something like, I don't know, anything up to $1 million. And if we taxed investment income of over $1 million, and it doesn't have to stop there. We could say any investment income of over $250,000, let's say $250,000. If we were able to raise and assess a Social Security tax on that investment income, right now, Obamacare started assessing a Medicare tax on investment income for the very first time. And there's a threshold. Yeah, it has to be above a certain amount. But if we did the same thing for Social Security income, it would raise roughly twice the revenue that raising the retirement age to 70 would bring in. So I'm sorry I took so much time today, but I wanted to touch on these two Republican myths and a lot of the rhetoric that we're going to be hearing from here on through next year as this presidential campaign winds down. So I apologize for taking so much time today, but I just wanted to kind of touch base on, these two areas which, like I say, Republicans by and large are going to make a big thing about during the coming political season here. We're going to be hearing this from virtually the entire Republican field about how we've got to slash entitlements, how we've got to do something about Social Security, and just keep in mind that these ideas of continuing to slash taxes and slash entitlements is a horrible idea. And the people that are going to be hurt the most by these measures, by these constitutional amendments to balance the budget, by slashing entitlements or making it more difficult to receive Social Security or delay it. The people that it's going to hurt the most are going to be the people that absolutely need it the most. And these folks don't care. They don't need these programs. This is easy for them. This is easy for them. Anyway, I'm Huck. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you again real soon.